Our last repeat speaker we'll have today is Matt. So Matt's going to discuss energy as a service, which we've been referring to a couple times here now. So Matt, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm back. So Matt Zipchen, president of Efficiency Capital. Efficiency Capital, we are developers, so we develop projects, get those business cases done. We invest in those projects, own those assets, get paid from the performance of those assets over time, and when the contract's over, transfer them back to the building owner or renew the contract depending. That story of what we just did will become relevant in a second. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the funding landscape, third-party solutions like energy as a service, and I'm actually going to try and shorten my presentation a little bit to save some room from the questions, but I'm also going to try and incorporate some of these questions because I think there's some good ones here. Next slide, please. Okay, so kind of funding landscape. If you look at the left branch, this is kind of your traditional approach. And I'm going to look at this, all of this, first of all, through three lenses: kind of capital, what type of capital, what is it, what's the flavor of it, what does it look like, how do you interact with it, risk and complexity, and then capacity. And each of these have a different impact on those things. Risk and complexity is how risky is this project? Is it new technology? Is it going to perform? Who carries that risk? Is it the energy as a service company? Is it the owner? Capacity is people are busy. Energy retrofits can be complex. The world has changed from a traditional approach. So what is that traditional approach? Sources of capital. I mean, you always start with the utility incentives. Any free money out there, you'll always want to optimize. You've heard about special assessments and equity and reserves. An important component, but also important to recognize that you spend $1 million out of your reserves. That's actually $1.3 million on average in terms of after tax from the unit holders' pockets. Loans, you've also heard, traditional financing. As you move away, I'm not going to go into loans too much, but I do want to comment that as soon as you move away from the kind of utility incentives and equity, you do have some financial benefits, but they come with more strings or more things that you have to do to enjoy those benefits. You heard about some of the requirements from the loan point of view. You wanted to make sure that there's some due process in place. There's going to be general security agreement. As you move to energy as a service and stuff, things become even more complicated because now you've got performance guarantees and monitoring just not of financial performance, but building performance. So that's kind of your traditional approach. And that served very well for the traditional world of building management. And what do I mean by that? I mean, asset management, building management, property management in terms of capital plans. You say, here's my reserve, here's my building condition, here's my end of life. I'm going to do my lights here in this year. I'm going to do my boiler in this year. And everything was very done in serial and separate. The energy world has moved on. And so has kind of the incentive programs and how you look at things. And part of the change management required is how those buildings actually get planned. So the benefit of changing, somebody asked about elevator programs, for example. You're not going to have elevator programs anymore. Even the incentive world is moving towards whole building performance. So a better question would be, are there programs out there that focus on energy efficiency, of which elevators can be included? It's about systems design now, not individual components. And that's one of the changes that is often needed to make this successful. Those changes have been reflected by all this kind of weird world of alternative solutions, which you kind of see on the right-hand branch. These specialized solutions, I'm not going to talk about PACE and on-bill because it doesn't really apply to condos in Ontario. But you get these third-party solutions that have, like Efficiency Capital, that basically provide their own capital in some form. Yes, it can be a debt and financing as one of the questions asked, but it can also be structured as non-debt. So for example, if you're a solar developer and you install solar equipment and you own that equipment, then you have a 20-year contract with the building purchasing kilowatt hours. That's not a loan or a debt. That's just a service. You're buying my electricity for 20 years and I'm at risk of whether the electricity gets produced. That would be an example of a third-party solution. Fully integrated retrofit where they do a turnkey, they own and operate it, and you pay them a service fee. So that idea of that solar developer has now been expanded to system developer. like Efficiency Capital, where we come in and do the whole system retrofit, HVAC, solar, EV if you want. And again, how you structure it is really important, which is the next slide, please. This is probably the most important slide, and I can skip through the last two really quickly. But this slide is when you look at your kind of different options, so again, capital, risk transference, retrofit capacity. In the world where you're doing a simple one measure retrofit, usually can do it yourself, pay for it yourself. As things get more complicated, there's more risk and things get busy. You're doing large systems, integrated systems. This is kind of lends itself to more third-party solutions. So look at kind of, the different deal sizes and project types. Third-party solutions like energy as a service, it's pretty rare you're going to have that solution for a $100,000 retrofit. Usually there are more transaction costs, more complexity, so you usually do need a larger minimum size of project, for example. Is it a generation or efficiency? Somebody asked about EV chargers. It's not really an efficiency program, but there are efficiency benefits. We can talk about that in the questions. Finance versus investment. This is related to the question of, is an energy as a service still finance? Well, that kind of depends on how it's structured. Finance is the idea that you borrow money, you have to pay it back on some sort of terms. Investment is somebody's investing in your building and they could lose all their money. They may not get it all back. So that idea of risk transference, they're getting paid on some performance. That's the difference between financing and investment. And everyone just says the word finance, but really looking at the program and say which one it is going to be important to your accountant and to also where the risk lies. What's the fee model? Is it a monthly service fee based on an interest rate? Is it an expected just monthly flat fee? Is it escalating? Does it variable over the summer months versus the winter months? Performance is, in the old world of let's do it ourselves. And I shouldn't say old world, it's traditional world of do it ourselves. It means you're also taking all the performance risk. You got to buy the equipment, and if you choose wrong, the new technology. Whereas third parties, you bring them in, they might provide performance guarantees. So, for example, we get our guaranteed our savings guaranteed and insured, for example, when we do our retrofits. Where does the ownership and control of the equipment lie? And then who has decision of the technology and the procurement? And then also who's in charge of maintenance over time? What happens if it fails? First of all, what happens if it underperforms? And then also what happens if it completely fails? Who owns that risk, and how's that been contracted? These are kind of key elements that you want to compare your base case with and kind of look at the options and contracting as you go forward. Next slide. I think I only have a minute left, so I'm going to cut this short. This was my comment about as you go from left to right, and everyone's going to get the slides, just the amount of complexity required and the additional due diligence and paperwork and transaction costs to really get to those benefits. So you do have to plan that. And then final slide. So this was me coming back to the Wood Green example. To recall, there was 1.3 million in their reserves, 2.5 or 2 million of end of life, and we expanded it to include some efficiency measures. It was a 30-year capital plan with capital renewal throughout. And we were able to stack sources of funding. So this is the other thing, is that every source of funding or every solution, whether it's energy as a service, whether it's a specialized loan like through the Canada Infrastructure Bank's aggregator program, of which Efficiency Capital is, they're all going to have different requirements. So at this point, the money, our solution at the time required us to just be in there for years. So that's why you see Capital getting paid out a share for savings for the first 10 years. We had a 20-year loan from the city of Toronto, which is still available to condos. It's an energy efficiency loan, and that can get paid off over 20 years. It does have some efficiency and planning requirements. And then after year 10, we dropped off and the savings started to accrue to the building owner, Wood Green, while also still paying off their efficiency loan. And by year 20 to 30, 100% of the savings went to Wood Green. Why that's relevant is I think somebody asked the question about the legalities of putting a solar or some sort of equipment and then getting paid out of savings. So one of the things Wood Green actually had to do, so you're used to budgeting $1 million a year in energy, and now your energy goes down to 800. what happened to that 200? They actually had to set up a budgetary line item to continue planning that and actually capture those savings. And they then put that back into their reserve, those savings. So there is some kind of financial accounting and plumbing that needs to be put in place. And that was for social housing. So it would be different in terms of the legalities of condos, but we can get into the questions because I'm going to end here.